His word as old To find out more about Robert Taylor's sacred hymns, I spoke to Jo Wainwright. Jo is Professor of Musicology at York University and he's editor of the York Early Music Press edition of Robert Taylor's sacred hymns. You can find a link in the description below. I found it fascinating to talk to Jo. He knows so much about the world in which this music was written. I'm sure you'll enjoy it too. Professor Jo Wainwright, thank you very much for spending some time to talk with me about the Sacred Hymns by Robert Taylor. Shall we start by reading the full title?
Why, yes, that's a very good start to it. Yes.
It's Sacred Hymns consisting of 50 select psalms of David and others, paraphrastically turned into English verse, published in London in 1615. I'd like to start by asking you, who was Robert Taylor?
Yeah, he's not a well-known figure. He's not a name most musicians know about. He was a composer and performer, born. We don't know exactly when, but obviously late in Queen Elizabeth's reign. The first thing we know about him is in 1610, when there's a register of his son's birth been recorded at the Church of St Dunstan in the West in London. The key fact, though, then, is that in 1613 his name appears again when he is paid for playing the lute at a masque as part of Prince Henry's group of musicians. So there we suddenly think, right, so this character is a musician. And then, equally importantly, a few years later, 1617, Taylor is appointed as a musician to the young Charles when he's Prince of Wales, and he becomes part of a group of musicians which include the likes of Alfonso Ferrabosco the younger, John Coprario, hence Coprario's music, Orlando Gibbons, he was the keyboard player for this group, and Thomas Lupo. This is, I don't think I can stress enough how important this group of court musicians are, because they really do leave us with a repertoire still today, which is absolutely wonderful.
When I look through the manuscript of the Sacred Hymns for the first time, I've never seen anything quite like it, because we find a lot of pages of religious text interspersed occasionally with a couple of pages of music.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Your eye is immediately drawn to pages and pages of text, and that they are actually, in effect, 50 psalms paraphrased to verses which we now know through research are by Sir Edwin Sandys. And then 12 of those 50 psalms are actually set to music, to tunes, he calls it. But those 12 tunes can then be, depending on the meter, used for the other 38 paraphrased metrical psalms which appear in the collection. So it's a cleverly thought out collection, and only 12 of them actually are underlaid with text. It really is a fascinating collection.
So the way you put it, it seems quite clear it was used for music making in the royal court, whereas I wondered if such a publication might be used for worship in the home for a musical family.
I think that if its starting point is the circles of Charles I, the fact that he then publishes this music immediately opens the possibilities up for, the publisher wouldn't go to all the effort unless he wanted to make some money and get some money back. So it is designed for dissemination, for exactly as you say, into aristocratic chambers or households that are at least musically literate, who probably quite enjoy the idea of copying what happens psalms in the private chambers of the king. You know, I'm sure there's a sort of emulation here, but it's devotional music.
The publication is a whopping 138 pages. Do we have any idea how expensive something like that was in 1615?
It wouldn't be cheap, put it that way, but my guess would be that Taylor, even in 1615, would probably be selling for at least a shilling, if not more. It would be expensive.
This collection is the first time I've seen psalm singing in the same context as viola da gamba or Lyra Viol playing. Can you tell us something more about the culture of psalm singing at this time? Where does this publication appear in that practice?
I think the practice of singing psalms goes back at least to 1535, thereabouts, when Miles Coverdale published his Ghostly Psalms and Spiritual Songs, he calls them. And that actually inspired a whole raft of biblical psalm publications produced in English poetic meter. So that's the paraphrase bit of the title. And the most popular of those, the one everyone's heard of, is Thomas Sternhold's Certain Psalms Chosen Out of the Psalms of David, which was printed in 1548-49. And so there was this tradition of singing domestic devotional psalms to metric psalms. That most of those were very simple, though, and that's why I think that the Taylor publication is so interesting, because it is so different. They're not the common tunes that that Sternhold and Hopkins set their psalms to.
How many performers would have played this music?
They're rather composed music, specifically composed, but as you suggested just now, the instrumentation is really rather special. What is really interesting is that Taylor gives you all sorts of possibilities for how to perform this. So the original title page, as you read out, tells us that the Psalms are, quote, set to be sung in 5 parts, as also to the viol and the lute, or Therion. The first stanza of the psalm is set to a treble voice accompanied by the Lyra Viol, notated in tablature. And then you have an untexted bass part underneath it, presumably for the bass viol. But then you turn the page and you get the other vocal parts, but they are untexted. So presumably they could also be played by viol consort as well. So I think the key thing is, and back to my point about the publisher wanting to make this a useful collection, wanting to sell it, it's designed to be used in whatever ways, whatever instruments, whatever voices you have available to you. This comes as a bit of a shock to us today, doesn't it? Where we like to be told, oh, this is for violins, this is for that, and you do exactly as you're told. I think 17th century music, well, 16th and earliest as well, their performances are characterized by freedom. I think it is an all-purpose, pragmatic collection of psalm paraphrases.
Okay, wonderful. I think on that note, it's a good point to conclude this short talk. And I just want to say thank you very much for making this whole world in the beginning of the 17th century come alive. Thank you very much, Jo.
My pleasure.